so much for the invitation. It's really an honor to be invited to speak. But before jumping into my to my short talk today, I wanted, as is typical in Japan, begin with my Jiko Shokai, my self-introduction, who I am and how I got here. Um, I'm originally from rural Tennessee. My hometown is Lynchburg, where they make Jack Daniel's whiskey. And thanks to the popularity of American whiskey in Japan, leading with that is a very effective way to make friends and get to know people, especially older Buddhist studies scholars. Um, a few years ago, I was attending the International Shin Buddhist Studies Conference in Vancouver. And one of my teachers was there. He said, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" I was like, "I don't know. I was going to go hang out with these guys." He said, "No, you should go hang out with the keynote speaker. He doesn't speak a lot of English." I was like, "But I haven't lived in Japan in 2 years. I'm really nervous that my Japanese is not going to be up for the task." So but when your teacher tells you to do something, you have to go do it, right? So I go to follow the keynote speaker and all their friends, and bowing and saying hello and all these things, and walk into the hotel suite with all these scholars from Japan, and I noticed that there are two large bottles of Jack Daniel's whiskey sitting on the counter, and I realized immediately we'll all be friends within about half an hour. So anyway, I was like, "Hey, my hometown, Furusato de show." In any case, so and by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day. I am of Scotch-Irish descent, I guess. So I don't know, but my kids are like quarter Irish, like proper Irish. In any case, so as you all know, middle rural Tennessee is not exactly a hotbed of Buddhist activity. And people often ask me, "How did you get into this line of work?" Sometime in middle school, I, went into a Barnes and Noble and saw a book on Zen, not really knowing what that is. I was just curious. And one book led to another book, led to another book, led to another book. And toward the end of high school, my mother got remarried, and her husband offered to pay for my college tuition if I worked to pay for my living expenses. So the college guidance counselors asked me, "Well, what do you want to do?" It's like, "Well, I don't know. Like, what do you like to do?" It's like, "Well, what I'd like to do is skip class and read books on Buddhism. Is that a job?" Right? Turns out, yes, it's a job, and I currently have that job. So basically, this is what I've done to get here, is just take one class after another. And then eventually they started paying me to take classes, and keep doing that for a while. Now they pay me to teach these classes. And it's really a delight. Along the way, though, my initial interest was in practice, and that led to an academic interest. And my academic interests have led to, have given me the opportunity to study various traditions, various practices. And um, about 10 years ago, when I became a father, I didn't want Buddhism to just be that weird thing that dad does. I wanted, Buddhism to be a thing that we could share as a family. Now, in 2005, I graduated from college and moved to Japan. I was an English teacher, and the company asked me where I wanted to go. And everyone seems to say Tokyo or Kyoto. It's like, "Well, I'm going to be different." And I said, "The point of going is to get good at Japanese." So I said, "Send me somewhere where I won't have the luxury of speaking English." And boy, did they deliver. So I ended up in the middle of nowhere in rural Kumamoto Prefecture, type of place that people cross the road to get a better look at you, or across the road to get away from. Okay. And there I met some really kind Jodo Shinshu priests. I would ride my little bike around, with those little baskets on the front, a little bell, ding ding, and ride my little bike around, and I'd find a temple, and I would walk in there like a space alien coming out of nowhere and say, "I'm interested in Buddhism. Could we have a conversation?" And after they'd get over the initial shock of what is happening. Why is this space alien with a beard speaking to me in Japanese? They would then offer tea, cookies, little ninju, right? And I was reflecting on this the other day, the generosity of our friends in the Dharma, the people who share the Dharma with us. I was reflecting on those people that I encountered, the kind priests in this little town in rural Japan, all of whom were Jodo Shinshu, all but like one or two, right? Um, I did meet a very nice Nichiren family, a very nice Shingon temple as well. But in any case, so all these Jodo Shinshu priests, right? Um, and I was just taken by Shin Buddhism. and that it had always stuck with me as I continued studying and living the peripatetic life of a grad student, moving back and forth between the US and Japan over many years. Shin just always stuck with me. And so when I happened to luck out and finish my PhD, and not only finish successfully, but also land a job right after, it's like winning the lottery. Like at this point, the jobs are drying up. That I happen to have been this lucky, I owe to the many people who supported me along the way and the taxpayers who paid for my tuition, right? I owe so much to many others. Um, I got this job and now I get to teach about Buddhism every day. I'm the faculty advisor as well for the Buddhist student group here. With Chiemi Sensei and Patty Sensei, I have a Kyogyo Shinsho reading group that meets every Wednesday at noon. It's the highlight of my week. And also, I'm a administrative assistant through the New York Buddhist Church, and we have a little Sangha here in Albany. And the other day, I was looking at our Sangha members as they were doing Oshoko. We have a little incense burner and some ninju for new people and things, ninju to pick up and put on as they do Oshoko. The ninju that we have sitting there are the little plastic ones that the priests in Kumamoto gave me. And this week I was looking at those ninju as my Sangha friends, I believe we had 10 people in attendance this last week. Everyone's picking them up and putting them on. I was thinking about how these ninju have come from, rural Kumamoto in 2005 to upstate New York in 2024. And I'm getting to participate in sharing the Dharma in the way that these people were back there, right? And then after Oshoko, we have a thing in our Sangha where somebody is assigned to do a reading, just like what you guys did. And one of our Sangha members picked the Ryogemon. And I have a translation of the Ryogemon that I did because that's what I do for fun, is translate things. And I wanted to share that with you guys today and reflect on perhaps how the Ryogemon can connect with our understanding of Ohigan. Right? So for my somewhat free rendering of the Ryogemon, having abandoned the mind of self-centered striving and the various haphazard forms of practice, with oneness of mind, we commend the great matter of nirvana to the Buddha of limitless life and light, the universal wisdom and compassion of ultimate reality. With even one moment of entrusting arisen in our minds, our rebirth is settled. Thus we recite Namo Amida Butsu as an expression of joy and gratitude. And to the benevolent teachers who established and transmitted this teaching, and those friends in the Dharma who have shared this teaching with us, we give thanks by putting the teachings into practice. Namo Amida Butsu. On Higan, we have the opportunity to think about our journey to the other shore. This journey can be expressed in many different ways. When I teach classes on Buddhism, students are often baffled by the diversity of Buddhism. They say Buddhism is so complicated. I explain to them that actually Buddhism is quite simple. It's the academic study of religion that's complicated. This is demonstrated by the fact that students say the same thing in my Introduction to Religion class. What even is Judaism? It's so complicated. There's so many different kinds. What even is Christianity? What even is Islam? Once you actually study this stuff, you realize that, whether it's, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, whatever, religions are internally diverse. Religions change over time, and the supposed boundaries are far more fuzzy than we would like to admit. Religions are, like all things, determined by the particular causes and conditions of their particular times. In my Introduction to Buddhism class and Japanese religions class, we explored various Buddhist traditions. Tantra is one of my areas of academic interest, so it's one of the things that I teach about quite a lot, and I think it's really fun. But when we get to Shinran, something is different. And this is not just because I happen to be a Shin Buddhist. This is just because of the way that Buddhism has changed over time and in that diversity. Time and time again, students say, finally, something that I could do. Right? Now, again, this is not my personal bias coming through. This is just, because whenever there's a tradition that is like lagging behind, like I have debates, Tendai versus the Nara schools, Tendai versus Shingon, the Kamakura schools versus the Heian schools, et cetera, et cetera. I always try to argue for whoever's lagging behind. Like, come on, Nichiren's so angry. Isn't that cool? Trying to present whoever, is lagging behind. Come on, what about Saicho? I know Kukai's cool, but what about Saicho, right? Come on. It doesn't matter because there's something special about Shinran. It's different. They say year after year, this is something I can do. After all this other stuff, sure, it's interesting, it's philosophically compelling, but here's something I can do. Something that has appeared recently that I think is interesting is we look at the esoteric schools, and then we look at the Kamakura schools, and I ask the students, which do you find more compelling? A comprehensive tradition where you can do all the things and all the texts and all the practices, or a single practice school like, Nichiren or Zen or Shin or something. And last year, they were about 50-50. About 50% of the class was like, oh, I like the comprehensive approach. And about 50% were like, no, I like the single practice approach. There's something to that, right? All right. So we think about all this diversity. Shinran's Buddhism is different than Renyo's Buddhism, and Renyo's Buddhism is different than ours. But in each case, new ideas emerge and fundamental truths are reaffirmed. One thing that I think binds us together is our tradition's unique approach to the path. Rather than the haphazard, eclectic striving of a single individual, right? There's a way of telling the Buddha's life story where it's the heroic male protagonist on his solitary journey of whatever. There's another way of telling the story that emphasizes that this bodhisattva who becomes the Buddha depended upon countless beings in their journey, and that we are part of that journey as well. Right. One of my favorite parts, and one of my kids' favorite parts, is where the earth goddess herself roars and Mara retreats. Right. That's important. In our tradition, rather than the haphazard striving of a single individual, our path offers an approach that is single in mind, focused, and direct. Okay? I'm sure many of us have friends who are really into astrology and crystals and tarot and all these other fun things. Perhaps some of us are as well. I do like a good crystal every now and again. I do like, a good mantra or dadani or esoteric text. Like, that's all really fun stuff. But what you often notice, you see this in, I see this in the world of medieval Japanese Buddhist texts. I see this in our contemporary culture, is that sometimes it becomes like a game. I got to get this. I got to get this. I got to get this. And rather than dealing with the anxiety, it rather expands that anxiety because I've got to get more. I've got to get more. So there's something about having a singleness of practice, a single approach that can be really helpful. Moreover, rather than relying on the self, we rely on one another. Our friends in the Dharma within our particular communities, our friends in the Dharma who've passed down the teachings to us, are part of our path. From the abbot of Honganji to the various teachers at Tokudo, to the parents who facilitate Dharma school, to the Sangha members who bring delicious things to Sangha potluck, we're all working together, not for our progress, not only for our progress on the path, but for all beings. In our Sangha here at Albany, we have a kind of Dharma circle or Howakai approach. We gather and chant Jusege, Junidai, make incense offerings, and once a month we have a potluck with Dharma school. The kids, part of the Dharma school activity for that week is for the kids to prepare the potluck offering, right? So that they have their lesson, they come upstairs and do golden chain for the community, then they go downstairs and prepare the meal for the Sangha. So they're integrated, right? And then once a month, we also have a guided meditation in the New York tradition. I see my role and the role of Reverend Gary, who's our Dharma teacher, as facilitator. Now, in many Sanghas, the teacher is the main attraction. Their spiritual purity and wisdom, they might whisper wise things at you. That's the model that the students are supposed to aspire to. In Shin, in my view, things are a little different. I am a Bombu of little wisdom. I am not the main event. The Sangha is the main event. Reflecting on the Ryogemon this week, I encouraged our Sangha members to think about how they are Just by showing up, they are creating space for others to encounter the Dharma. We're all Bombu together, and by showing up week after week, we're also becoming Kalyana Mitra, or friends in the Dharma, for others, to help others encounter the Dharma. Just by showing up, you create space for others to encounter the Dharma. In that way, our striving on the path, our journey to the other shore, is not about I, it's not about my effort, it's about us. It's about our journey together, relying on one another and relying on that power that is other, that power beyond the self, that power that unites us all as one Sangha. In this way, I think Buddhism is quite simple. My awakening depends on your awakening. My awakening depends on Amida Buddha's awakening. And Amida Buddha's awakening depends on our awakening. We're all in this together and we are all one. Add to that, bringing something delicious to the potluck, and rather, I think Buddhism is quite simple. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you all for your time. Thank you again for inviting me to speak on the Dharma. I understand that we'll be having a chat after the service, and I'm looking forward to that very much. So thank you all. I'm Amita.